Week 1 of the NFL season has just wrapped up, and I think it's pretty fair to say that the New York Giants have the worst quarterback situation in all of football. And let me tell you, there's some pretty tough competition out there. I mean, for starters, we've got the Las Vegas Raiders, whose best case scenario is to go out there every single week with Gardner Minshew under center. And I'm sure Minshew is a great guy, a great locker room guy, but I'll tell you what he isn't: a starting caliber quarterback in the NFL. But if there's one thing Minshew did this week that Daniel Jones wasn't able to do, it was to lead his team down the field and into the end zone, because he did have a touchdown pass this game against a Chargers team who I believe is better than the Vikings squad that the Giants went up against. Hell, you have the Tennessee Titans, who are going out there with Will Levis and no backup plan. And they went up against a Bears offense who was probably the only offense that looked worse than the Giants, and Will Levis still managed to throw the game away. Literally, he threw a pick six that essentially lost the game for the Tennessee Titans. And yet, despite all of that, I still firmly believe that the Giants situation with Daniel Jones is far worse than anyone else's in the entire NFL. And is that some D1 hater shit? Yeah, probably, but who really cares about Daniel Jones' feelings besides Vikings edge rusher Jonathan Grenard, who spoke to the media a few days after their game and came out and said that they really started to feel sorry for him mid-game because they were absolutely dominating Daniel Jones in that offense. For your opponent to come out and say that they started to feel bad for you before the game was even over, I mean, that might be worse than them just talking smack. It's gotten so bad that other teams' players are starting to feel pity for Daniel Jones and the situation that's going on in New York. Now, let's get to the Vikings game, all right? You see, in this game, there were 11 drives ran by the Giants offense, and 6 of those ended in punts. I could show you a punt compilation right now, and this would only be from 1 week. And there's a reason for this. Maybe it's the 5 sacks that the Giants gave up throughout the game, or possibly the 9 penalties that the Giants committed throughout the game that cost the team 95 yards. And a majority of those penalties were coming on the offensive end. If there's one thing that can absolutely kill a team's momentum, it's penalties and it's sacks. Those are 2 major drive killers in the NFL, and the Giants were allowing plenty of both of those things. I mean, yes, the Giants did get down the field several times, but a majority of those red zone trips ended in little to 0 points, if any. Now, the Giants did score 2 field goals in the game. However, the first one came after the Giants were basically handed the best starting field position that they could ask for because of a Vikings fumble. They got the ball at the Vikings 20. And what did they do with it? Well, Daniel Jones would scramble for 1 first down, but after getting inside the goal, they weren't able to convert and ended up settling for a field goal. And the second one came in a drive where the Giants were really pushing the ball forward. Of course, at this point, the Giants were already losing 21-3 after halftime. So the game felt like it was out of reach, and the Giants really needed to score here. However, the drive would get killed by, you guessed it, penalties and sacks. Van Gotten, a guard for the Giants, ended up getting called for offensive holding, and 2 plays later, Daniel Jones would get sacked, and all the momentum they had coming out of the half was slaughtered right then and there. And then, that was about it for the Giants and their points, right? And you might be thinking, well, how could this get worse for Danny Dimes? It really feels like it can't. That shit is already terrible. You're absolutely wrong, buddy, because in the very next drive, on the first play, Daniel Jones throws the ball and it ends up in the hands of Van Ginkel. Not only does it end up in Van Ginkel's hands, he takes that bitch to the house. Yup, a pick six right after a failed drive where they had to kick a field goal. And this is where the interesting stat comes in that you've heard plenty of times after this game, which is that Daniel Jones has thrown more pick sixes than touchdown passes since receiving a 4-year deal worth $160 million. Yes, after he got paid out and got an absolutely massive bag, he's gone on to throw more touchdowns for the other team than his own team. okay? And how did Daniel Jones secure that bag? I don't know. All right, the Giants front office is absolutely ignorant. And 2 drives later, can you guess what happened? Well, the Giants offense got onto the 11-yard line of the Minnesota Vikings before Daniel Jones decided to throw it into the hands of Harrison Smith for the 2nd interception of the day. And after that, well, it was pretty much a whole lot of nothing. No one was tuning into this game because it was a blowout, a boring blowout. There was not really any excitement from the Giants end, and Sam Darnold and the Vikings didn't have to do much to wrap up the easiest win that they're going to have all year. Now, I'll get back to talking about Daniel Jones in a second, but for right now, I just wanted to remind you guys to slow down, like the video, and subscribe to the channel. Every subscription is greatly appreciated, and we're on the road to 5,000 subscribers. All right, now let's get back to talking about Daniel Jones, talking shit about Daniel Jones, because if there's one thing that's easy to do, it's to talk shit about a millionaire who's bad at his job. In the 6 years that Daniel Jones has been the New York Giants quarterback, the record there in New York is 22 wins and 37 losses and 1 tie under Daniel Jones. They've had more losing seasons than I could even count, but let's count it out anyway. 2019, losing season. 2020, losing season. 21, losing season. 23, a losing season. The only good season that the Giants have had with Daniel Jones as their quarterback was 2022, the year that his contract was up and he needed to get paid. And what did he do? Well, he had a pretty good year. I mean, the team did go 9-7-1, 9-6-1 under Daniel Jones, but were they winning because of Daniel Jones, or were they winning because they had one of the greatest running backs of all time in Saquon Barkley, who was balling out, and a pretty good defense? I would take the latter, all right? Anyway, the season in 2022 where Daniel Jones ends up throwing for a career-high 3,200 passing yards, a little solid, 15 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. Yeah, apparently, those stats, according to the New York Giants front office, is enough to earn you $160 million over 4 years. They did win a playoff game against the Minnesota Vikings, but they got absolutely blown out by divisional rivals in the divisional round. The Philadelphia Eagles absolutely took care of them, and that was about it for the playoff experience that Daniel Jones has had his whole career. It's not much, all right? Daniel Jones having a solid to good year in 2022 was probably the worst thing that could have happened to this franchise. If you remember correctly, heading into the 2022 season, Daniel Jones was halfway out the door. His time in New York was basically over with. He already had 3 coaches at this point. There was no real need to keep Daniel Jones there. Maybe he was the problem. He is the problem. But instead, he flukes out with the best career year he probably has had since his rookie season, and the Giants see enough in him to keep him, and that ends up costing them Saquon Barkley a few years later, because now Saquon Barkley is balling out with the Eagles. I mean, he was in Brazil just this past weekend, and he got 3 touchdowns in 1 game and was a major reason as to why the Eagles looked competent on offense. They were pretty dog shit, but Saquon Barkley kept finding a way to get into the end zone, so there is that. I mean, like I said, since Daniel Jones has gotten paid, he has not shown up for the Giants. He did tear his ACL that very same season in which he got all of that money. His first year in the contract, tears his ACL, so he only ended up playing 6 games. In those 6 games, well, 2 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. He looked terrible before the injury. And now that he's back, fully recovered from his injury, he doesn't look any better. Who knows how long the Giants decide to run it with him this season. I doubt he lasts past the 2024 campaign because there's no real future with Daniel Jones here. They might just have to hit the rebuild button again and call it quits and just tank the amount of money, whatever cap hit that it's going to cost to either release or trade Jones. You don't want him on the team if he's going to be a backup. It'll be a pretty bad look for the locker room. But anyway, that's about it for this video. Just wanted to talk about the Giants because they're ass and they couldn't beat the fucking Vikings with Sam Darnold. But anyway, catch y'all later. Much love. Deuces.